Hello everyone, I'm Tom. I've been keeping leopard geckos now on and off for about 25 years and I now have the one male leopard gecko in a bioactive enclosure, and today I thought I'd share with you some of my own research and discuss how we can apply this to recreate its natural habitat in a way, in captivity. And we're going to use Edward John Cormady's theory on the mosaic nature of the environment. Okay, so let's first of all look at what a leopard gecko natural environment looks like in the wild. Now, last week I mentioned Dr. Mohammed Sharif Khan, who is a specialist in leopard gecko and herpetology science. And he did a field study in the Salt Range Hills in Pakistan on leopard geckos. So he studied their habitat and their taxonomy and feeding habits and other things. So it's definitely a document that's worth looking into. It's Mohammed Sharif Khan, and it's available on Google Scholar and ResearchGate. Now, here we can see that there is a varied landscape to form the habitat of the leopard gecko. We have some lush green grassy areas, some scrubby bushy areas, and some low forested areas as well. And we can also notice the dry, arid areas. So this kind of defies the myth that leopard geckos come from deserts. They may live in semi-deserts, which we can see on these photos. It's kind of like a semi-desert region, particularly if we look at the one on the far right. We can see there's quite a bit of land which is kind of like rocky and, you know, small vegetation and dry. Whereas if we look at the top left photograph, it's a bit more lush and green. And this reflects the monsoon seasons which occur in this region for a couple of months of the year in the summer. So this kind of forms the basis really of our design. And the term that's used, which we can it's good to get an understanding because it will apply a little bit to the processes that occur in the terrarium, and that is geology. It's a very broad term which describes the study of the physical structure of the Earth and its natural minerals, the history of all life on Earth, and its energy and its evolution. It's a very broad topic, but obviously we're just going to take snippets out of that to apply the theory into our design. Now, each physical structure in the terrarium is, so for example, the rocks, the bark, branches, and so on, They are formed by geochemical processes, and the study of that is known as geochemistry. So if you say, look at a log, it's a solid, and it's made up of tiny particles known as atoms, molecules, and ions, which compress and compact to form the structure of the log. And this applies to other solids, liquids, and gases, such as water, which is made up of hydrogen and oxygen. We don't see those chemicals working together, but basically, in a nutshell, the physical things that we see in the terrarium are made up of tiny particles, and collectively they create that habitat for the leopard gecko. So that is geochemistry. Basically, makes the earth a wild, restless place. And this can be applied to the terrarium as well. It's not just a still environment, there's a whole lot of things going on that we don't see. So these are the physical features in the terrarium sample. And next we are going to look at the biological living things in the terrarium. So this list here is all the things that I have in my terrarium. And so from the tiny genetic cells that make up each living thing and contribute to the process of natural selection and reproduction to allow the process to continue, we have the biotic elements to the habitat. This forms the food web. So here we have a biodiverse range of plants, insects, soils, and the gecko as the primary consumer. And so they interact with each other. So for example, the spider may feed on the springtails and the flies and the mites. The ground beetle will feed on the slugs. The slugs help to contribute to the decaying matter. They feed on the kind of bacteria and fungi and decaying organic matter, as well as the live plants. So we can see that this cycle is important for the biodiversity of the terrarium. So how does this link to Cormandy's theory? Cormandy pioneered the theory of mosaic nature of the environment. Now, a landscape mosaic is basically a combination of varying ecosystems which come together to form a community of landscapes. And this is made up of physical non-living things and the biological living things, which connects the whole system together to form the ecosystem and the habitat. So this landscape mosaic theory by Cormandy can be applied to the design of the terrarium. And we have different fragmented zones, the arid zone, the humid zone, and the cool zone, which are each divided by transition zones, which help to create microclimates within the terrarium and varied ecosystems, which are fueled by biogeochemical cycles. And that's basically the way in which the Earth recycles its material through geological, chemical, and biological processes. And that leads us to our conclusion. So, in relation to advancing husbandry, by providing a varied landscape and a varied biological system, insects, living plants, and fertile, rich soil. Over time, this will grow into a thriving environment for the leopard gecko. Now, for further reading, I have included this list of references, which I do in all my presentations. And I would particularly recommend you look at the videos on there which explain ecology, geology, and biogeochemical cycles in a little bit more detail and visual, interactive way. So thank you for watching, guys. I hope this has helped, and I look forward to presenting again next week.